Hello, everyone. I'm Mystery.
And I'm Mortimer, the Authenticator, and we are the Duality of Man.
Today, we're talking about standards, the standards that men have for their partners, themselves, and the standards that we as men should have for society. Let's start out talking about the standards that men want with their partners. Dalton, do you want to start us off by talking about what standards you may have in someone you're looking for?
Yeah, I suppose. Bear in mind that I am gay, so my standards are going to be standards for another man that I hope to someday meet and make my significant other. Frankly, most of my standards are. I guess I'm weird in the sense that my standards are fairly simple and straightforward, but they could be considered high depending. Like for example, I tend to like men that are tall, and or muscular. However, most of my standards have more to do with the person's internal makeup, i.e., their personality, etc. And the things I'm most attracted to are what used to be referred to as purity of heart and or innocence. That tends to be what I'm most attracted to, because effectively what I'm looking for is my opposite. I am a short, nerdy, world weary, um, somewhat cynical person. Ergo, I am looking for essentially the big, tough, but sweet and innocent jock to sort of counterbalance me. That's mostly what I'm looking for in men, and you would think that would be a fairly simple thing to obtain, but alas, the gay community has yet to provide for that very simple set of desires I have there. Like I'm not even that concerned about who makes the money or who who does the work and who stays home or whatever. Like that stuff that stuff I put in the we can figure it out as soon as I meet this person pile. I put a lot of things in that category because my thinking is if I can just meet someone worth having and who wants me in return, everything else will sort of automatically fall in place because a stable relationship will hopefully spawn from that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I understand your pain. Maybe not exactly, but uh, I definitely have had trouble looking for the type of woman I desire. It's well, as far as looks goes for me, like I've been attracted to a wide variety of different women of different races, looks, body types. So it's really hard to pin one down physically.
Hmm.
As far as personality, definitely feminine, uh, compassionate, uh, caring, supportive, and peaceful.
Hmm.
And I think in my entire life, I've only found maybe one woman that met those characteristics. Unfortunately, she was already with someone at the time.
Oh, that hurts. I commiserations on that one, my dude. Um, I I have what I tentatively refer to as my gold standard guy. He's a guy who I've known ever since like first grade, and he was the top wrestler of our entire high school, and he ended up going to West Point on a full athletic scholarship. And just this last year, or I think it wasn't even a year, I think it was like 6 months ago, he got married. And I know rationally and intellectually that I had no chance with him, that he was straight, that even if he was gay, he probably would want someone more like himself because that's a thing in the gay community. A lot of athletic people want other athletic people, which is fine and all for them, but it bothers me and it bothers a lot of the gay community because the quintessential gay relationship that we in the gay community are sold on is like the jock top and the bottom nerd tends to be the quintessential pairing in all gay romance fiction, or at least a large enough subset of gay romance fiction that everyone is familiar with it, and thus it gets really annoying. But in any case, yeah,
Is that like the gay equivalent of just be nice and she'll like you?
I I think I think so. I wish that wasn't the case. I wish the world made more sense, but we don't live in a sensible, rational world. We live in a world as designed by Terry Pratchett's evil twin. Thus, here we are.
Yeah, and honestly, this girl, when I met her, I liked her so much, and she was really such a rarity that I almost considered throwing my morals out of the window and making my attempt anyway, despite aforementioned relationship status.
Mm, mm-hmm.
I mean, I didn't. I stuck to my morals, but I was tempted, very tempted.
Yeah, I don't even normally get that far because the types of guys that I like almost invariably are straight, and even though I know that, it still doesn't. It doesn't. As the old saying goes, the heart wants what the heart wants, and therefore I basically end up psychologically torturing myself every time I fall in love with a guy because that's just how that works. Why would anything be made easy? Uh, and I'm not saying and therefore gay people have it hard or anything. I'm saying much like the hornet's nest of lies that heterosexual dating has become, the gay community is not much better in this regard. It's hard for everyone all over.
That's the thing. Like, I I would like to get married one day, uh, even though I know that's the essential of putting my head into a guillotine and hoping the blade doesn't fall. But
Uh-huh. Sort of Damocles time.
but I believe that marriage is a good thing before the government got involved. But it's harder and harder to find women that actually would make a good wife. Like, it's one thing to find a woman that you're attracted to. It's another thing to find a woman that you're attracted to and would also make a good wife. So, like, the women who, you know, do, fit into the center of that Venn diagram, like, so many people are also after that, select group of women because
You forgot the third circle. Someone who you like would make a good wife and is also attracted to you. That's a very crucial
yes,
third vector on the Venn diagram there.
yes, I almost forgot that. That's a good point. So, like, that's a relatively small pool of women, and like so many other guys who may also have your same, like preferences physically, are also looking for somebody who could make a good wife. Or like, it's like a freaking war out here. It's like when a country falls and then a bunch of warlords come in. Everybody just starts taking whatever they can.
I mean, evolution is often strawmanned as survival of the fittest, and lest we forget that dynamic there involves a lot of fucking. Therefore, the turf war as to who gets to fuck and or pass on their genes is not a new phenomenon.
I
However,
mean,
I think it's gotten extremely absurd in recent times.
it'd be easier if we were back in the olden days where you could just beat someone up and get whatever one you want. I mean, I could just defeat them, but no, we live in a quote unquote civilized society, and therefore I must adhere to certain
Yeah, we live
societal
in a
restrictions.
society, so he can't just Conan the Barbarian his way to the top of the evolutionary pipeline there. And I don't even know what the fuck that means for me, because I guess no, I'd be fine. I'd be fine in ancient Rome. I would be fine in Greece. I would be fine in Rome because they didn't give a fuck about gender. They only cared about tops and bottoms. But even then, I guess I wouldn't be fine because I'm a bottom, and that was shameful in every society. So nerds to me, I suppose.
But it seems that all right. I think the one important thing about a standard is that you must apply it across the board
Yep.
in like every situation to which it would apply. But
A standard that isn't universalizable is not a standard to speak of, really.
yeah, like I've watched some of these podcasts where they have women on and talk about relationships, and like they always seem to have the standard of the guy I don't like, I'll sleep with him like right away. But the guy I actually like and who likes me and that I would actually consider being in a relationship with, I'm gonna make him wait 3 months. To which
I the mm, like
that's no
okay
proper standard for behavior. I mean, first
in
of all, like if you're gonna you should make someone wait before you sleep with them so that you actually know who the hell they are. But second, if you don't even actually
sex
like the
the
person, why are
cherry,
you
not the
giving
ice
them
cream, as it
exactly what
were.
they want? Like, I don't like this person, so I'm going to give him what he wants.
That that strikes me as the exact opposite of anything resembling a rational standard. But what the fuck do I know?
The thing
As
is,
we've
like,
established, I might be the odd one out here. So maybe I'm the weird one. That seems counterintuitive to me, though.
if I was dating a woman and she made me wait a couple of months, but she made everybody wait a couple of months, I wouldn't be upset because, that's her standard of making sure that we actually know each other before we get physically involved.
And
That's
I
an
mean,
acceptable
it gives you
standard.
guys time to court and like you say, get to know each other and so on and so forth. And to be fair, back in ye olden days, a courtship process was standard practice. So I don't think I don't think the simple act of putting off the cherry on top of the sundae, as it were, is a bad thing. But the whole oh yeah, I will make the people who I actually give two fucks about, literally, wait 3 months. But the person I only give half of a fuck about, eh, instant gratification. What?
Yeah, and as a man who is, who wants a relationship, if I'm dating someone and I found that they're the type of person who would have sex with someone they don't like it's like a one night stand, like frankly, I find that disgusting.
It also, it, again, I know I harp on the evolution point more than your average eugenicist, even, but it's also evolutionarily counterintuitive because back in the olden days, before birth control and contraception and yada yada yada, um, if you hate fucked somebody, like that seems to be the case of, you were in a good chance of completely screwing over your finite number of chances to procreate properly and therefore pass your genes on to the next generation and have an impact on the gene pool and so on and so forth. Which is literally unnaturally stupid. If you were that stupid back in the Stone Age, you would set your species back millions of years, possibly. And maybe I'm a bit idealistic here, but I don't think we should. I don't think we should set back the species for nothing more than an act of stubborn pique, essentially. Like that's the only thing I can think of is someone getting so pissed off at somebody they just literally fuck them. I don't even know how angry I would have to be before that would even begin to make sense. I know we say the phrase fuck you when we're angry and stuff, but it's not lit it cannot be literal in a world that makes sense.
I know how angry I would have to be, and never again.
Oh, oh no. What happened?
Yeah, I'm not drunk enough to tell that story. But anyway, uh, back to the matter at hand. Um, you know, people, date. They used to date for the purposes of finding someone to marry. Like that was the point of dating. You were
A significant
seeking,
other, i.e., someone who you found to be more significant than the average punter.
yeah. But nowadays, people are dating purely for fun, and the thinking that, oh, I'm going to get serious about getting a relationship later, which is absolutely pointless because the purpose of dating is to find somebody like to be in a serious long-term relationship with. If you're just going for fun, all you're doing is wasting time because at the end of it, you're not going to have achieved anything.
And by no means am I saying, or and I hope you're not saying either, that dating shouldn't be fun while you're pursuing a significant other. I mean, if you can't have fun with your significant other, then right there is suggestion one as to why you shouldn't be pursuing this particular significant other. But if you're dichotomizing it, if your choices are fun or seriousness, then you are just objectively wrong on both counts. You should not be dichotomizing it like that at all. Fun and significance should go hand in hand. And if they're not going hand in hand, then I'm sorry, but there is probably something wrong with you, like neurologically at that point, because that is not normal for Homo sapiens circa the last several 100,000 and possibly millions of years.
You know, I think one of the things that we've lost in today's society is the idea that the is that your parents would vet the person that you are dating. That they would come in, you would like bring the person you're dating to your home. They would talk with your parents, maybe have dinner,
The
and your parents.
stereotypical rom-com bring someone home for the holidays to meet the folks, etc., etc.
Yeah, but there's a point to that because your parents have more life experience. They know what to look for in certain red flags that you might not be aware of, and they're not blinded by the affection that you feel for that person. To
Well,
them
it's
knowing they
also
have to.
if they're going to be a part of this family in some kind of short order, then we probably should be sure that everybody gets along at least somewhat. Also, in my case, bragging. When I get a significant other and we go through the like rom-com montage style thing, bringing him home to meet the folks is probably going to be mostly about bragging rights for me. But that's neither here nor there.
And I mean, like, you know, like a father as a man is very good at detecting when other men are bullshitting.
I mean, not my father. My father is mildly autistic. My supposition would be because he's not good at that. But that's neither here nor there.
I mean, I get that, but you get the point I'm trying to make, though,
Yeah,
right?
In theory and in most cases, that's how that works. Um, my father is by no means a standard for how fathers should behave, and someday, if we ever do a duality of men and fathers episode again, assuming we already have, I might persuade myself to get drunk enough to tell that story, but not today because I'm already overtired.
So, you know, you should have a standard for the person you're with, and also you should make sure that the person that you're with has standards.
Okay, and what's more, you should have, like, irrespective of society, irrespective of the world, irrespective of external jiggery pokery, you should have logically consistent standards for yourself, inherent to yourself. Surely, if you have a nature, and everyone has a nature, then then I'm gonna pull out the old ancient Greek chestnut and go, it is partially your job as a sentient being to obtain self-knowledge and self-awareness, and in so doing, probably develop some kind of standard of how do I perfect this nature that I inexorably have to
No,
some degree. And that's also
you
something you can decide for yourself, but the point being, you should go through the process of figuring that shit out, where your personal standards, translate into actualization and how much of that actualization you actually need or want or whatever.
I'm sure that all of us have you know a certain um, criteria for how we should behave, what we consider to be over the line or out of bounds, what we consider to be good behavior and bad behavior. And what I found is that a lot of people are very good at excusing themselves of their bad behavior, coming up with
Oh
whatever
God, the
justification that
special
they
pleading
may
fallacy is my personal nemesis. The just sheer excuses for cognitive dissonance that come from this identical in all but terminology thing that I'm doing. It's totally different from this other thing that I criticize other people for doing. Derp. I mm, it enrages me. Also, I don't know how recent this phenomena is, but there are a lot of people whose principles seem to be um entirely endothermic, i.e., coming from outside and moving in rather than coming from inside and moving out, meaning that they hold everyone else to standards, but they never hold themselves to it, rather than your standards applying to yourself first and then expanding outward from there, depending on um how much your standards hold up to scrutiny.
yeah. And it always seems that people's standards, they aren't static. They're constantly changing with the wind. Like something that would be considered absolutely unacceptable, like say 1 year, is perfectly fine the next, and then nobody recognizes. Wait, what was this shift that just freaking happened?
We can lock down the entire world because pandemic, but we're totally not authoritarian. But if you don't take the jab, you're immoral. Dot dot dot. Like, I don't. I know YouTube is gonna bitch at us for going there, but if there is a better example in recent history of this exact phenomena, I can't think of it.
Yeah, there was a post on Twitter that go ahead for this, but basically says that like how people will you know where it's fairly obvious that something is happening that everybody agrees is bad, but then a certain group of people will come out and say, "No, it's not happening." And then when it's too obvious, no, it's like, "Okay, it's happening, but it's a good thing." This is it's like, I mean,
And then of
yeah,
course
but
the
it's not
final
as bad as you
terminus.
say it is.
The fact that it happened is totally nothing to do with what we advocated for. Derp.
Yeah, it just
Just
it also seems that you know people have standards for how they should be treated, but they have no standards for how they should treat others. Basically, anything that happens to me is a tragedy for humanity, and whatever I do to other people is just what they deserve.
yep, yep. It's cognitive dissonance. I'm convinced of it. That or for some reason, like maybe I'm weird, but when I even think about violating my own standards, my brain treats me to a week's worth of anxiety just from that one thought. And as annoying as that might be, there are ways in which I'm grateful to it because it allows me to know when I'm fucking up. Um, do some people just not have anything resembling that at all?
I mean, I definitely
Am
do.
I that outside the norm?
I mean, when I come close to breaking my standards and ethics, I just have a voice in my head that says, "Just don't, just don't. You know this is wrong. Just don't do it." And then on the rare occasions where I fail to live up to my standards, I always get very upset with myself because I, when you know it's something you shouldn't do and you do it anyway, like you have no excuse.
See, for me, it actually kind of physically hurts me because like my whole body does this annoying twitch thing, almost like Sideshow Bob with the rake. Like it almost feels like I've hit a wall if I catch myself contradicting myself. And it can be something as simple as my own private freaking thoughts. It's very annoying, but again, if it's a choice between having Sideshow Bob, hit with a rake Gurr syndrome, or Lulu, I can just do whatever I want and contradict myself whenever I like. I'll take the being hit with a rake syndrome.
For me, it generally manifests as a sense of self-loathing for failing to be the person that I know I desire to be.
Yep. It's also my brain has a tendency to spiral um with regards to things like that because then comes the back and forth of but what if you're wrong? But what if that thing that you thought earlier to prevent yourself from doing this is also wrong? And then it becomes a domino effect of what if literally everything you've ever known is wrong and every supposition you've ever made is wrong and every interpretation of any evidence you've ever gotten is wrong? Rinse and repeat a couple dozen thousand times. Which is probably why I'm such a pedantic asshole and so OCD when it comes to details, because my brain literally does it on its own, whether I want it to or not. So at least in a way that sort of ends the end result of that is you refine it into a skill, or you have a nervous breakdown, or both. But I haven't gotten
And
to nervous breakdown territory yet.
the thing is, it's very easy to appeal to the will of the crowd and say, well, all these people say that this isn't wrong. I mean, I'm just one person. And all these people said that it's fine. I mean, am I going to say that I'm right and they're wrong? And it's like, yes, they are wrong. You know they're wrong.
I mean,
Stop trying to
for
justify
for
it.
for 1,000 years or so, people believed the Earth was flat. That doesn't change the objective truth of that statement. And frankly, I, I, I get annoyed with the idea that morality is anything other than objective, but I also get annoyed with the people whose only way of processing objective morality is to off-road it onto a being, onto a deity or something. Because here's the thing. I see morality as a natural consequence of logic, just like math, just like logical absolutes, like the fact that a circle is round. And something can be objective without us knowing the entirety of it. Just like the sciences. There is an objective truth to the physical universe, and just because we only are as caught up with that as we are doesn't change the fact that whatever the end result of our knowledge of that system is will be objective. I'm in the same boat with regards to logical parameters, and that includes morality. Of just because we don't have the complete corpus of morality as a species doesn't mean that that information is not out there somewhere to be discovered later, and doesn't mean that we aren't at least obliged to use the most current and up to date model of morality that we can find. And hopefully the most logically consistent model we can find, because logically inconsistent models lead to the cognitive dissonance that, and special pleading and poisoning of the well and appeals to authority and all the other evil things that result in my brain spiraling for days on end.
Well, I think when it comes to morality, I think the primary thing that you should be looking for is a system is coherent and consistency.
I would advise a combination of Kant's categorical imperative and Rawls' veil of ignorance standard. Some combination of those two usually ends up being somewhere near the mark, with possible assistance from Socratic questioning as a method. Because Socrates may have been wrong about some things, but he was at the very least on to something with regard to a method that worked.
I think that one thing that can be said about morality is that it should be so that if um, you view that behaving in this way and that doing these things a certain way is good, then if you applied it to wider society, it would also have a positive effect.
Yeah, again, Kant's categorical imperative, don't advocate for anything lest you advocate that it become a universal law. Um, and yeah, I tend to agree. And I want to emphasize again, just for anyone that's listening, your standards apply to you first and primarily. If you cannot live up to your standards, then you need to reevaluate your standards until your standards are something you can actually live up to. And then and only then do you get to export it onto everyone else. You by no means should do it the other way around, because so many people seem to do it the other way around, where they will apply their standards to the world, and only when the world is perfect, by whatever definition they're going with, do they even think to apply it to themselves, if at all. And that's not just wrong, that is the exact opposite of the way you're supposed to do it. Your rules should apply to you first, and then if you find a system that works for you, then maybe you can start finding ways to universalize it out onto the rest of everyone else.
And the thing is, like, people often apply standards only to things that benefit them, and then when it comes to a situation in which they would be punished because of, at those standards, they just throw them away. Like, no, like, if your standard of behavior calls that you have, violated that standard and therefore must receive some form of punishment, you have to take that punishment, whatever it is.
Yeah, as Karen Strawn once said, I don't define justice as whatever benefits me. if I benefit from something that is wrong, then that in and of itself is wrong. And if I don't benefit from something that is right, so be it. The thing was still right inherently.
Exactly. And if people are so concerned about getting as much as they can out of something while having as little burden as possible.
And on some level, I get that because we're all hoping to get something positive out of this thing we call life at the end of the day, and or avoiding as much pain as we can in the interim. So I get the impulse, but when it contradicts everything else about your sense of logic, you done fucked up somewhere. Something in your calculations went wrong in that case.
It, what I've seen is that some people, like, their standard of behavior is twisted, but they can only view that it's okay to act that way because other people around them are doing what they're supposed to. It's kind of like animals in a zoo where the animals can, they can run around, they can throw stuff, they can break stuff, they can eat whatever they want, they can, have sex with each other, and they'll be taken care of because the zookeepers always go in and do the work that, keeps their environment stable.
Hmm.
So,
I.e., things only work in a bubble of the world is already perfectly suited for me. And the very second the world is no longer perfectly suited for them, they're faced with the naturally occurring consequences of their own actions and go, What what is wrong with the world? I faced naturally occurring consequences for my actions. That's not how this is supposed to work.
yeah, and there's so many things that, you know, outside the bubble where the laws of nature would apply would have gotten them, annihilated. Trying to watch my language here on YouTube, but because they're in the bubble, like, they're free to engage in that destructive behavior without suffering what would normally be the consequences of those actions.
And it's gotten so bad that a certain subset of intellectuals has actually legitimately started vilifying the concept of causality or transactions. And it absolutely makes me irate. It makes me want to murder the world to hear these people use the word transactional as though it is some kind of four-letter dirty word, or to use the word causality as though it is some primitive backwards um idiotic illusion. And I'm just like, it, it goes along to some degree with this other thing I've noticed, which is the worshipping of abstraction, of like the most abstract thing is also the thing they prize the highest, and therefore the thing they aspire to the most. And I'm just like, that is categorically wrong. Causality is a beautiful thing. The fact that we can reliably, account for the fact that causes are followed by effects and vice versa. And transactions are basically the human version of that, where in a proper transaction, you give something and you get something in return, and the person you're in the transaction with also gets something and gives something in return. Like, that's a perfectly well-oiled logical machine, and for some reason, according to a certain strain of modern intellectuals, it's idiotic, naive, primitive, backwards, immoral, and every other negative thing under the sun, as and when we can be bothered to address the argument. As as though what you hear it all the time of like you're not entitled to X thing, which would be an organic effect from the cause that you gave. You're not entitled to positive emotional impact, even though you gave positive emotional impact to other people.
Yeah,
People aren't obligated to treat you well just because you treat them well, herder. In fact, that makes you immortal to expect that level of transactional um, behavior.
yeah. One thing that just came to mind is I'm sure you've like seen these videos of young people going saying that we shouldn't have to work to survive, and I'm like, that's what survival is.
I
It's work.
I
Not working is just laying down and waiting to die. Like,
I mean,
if here's
okay.
the thing, there
Aside from that very scary thing there, uh, what exactly are you going to do with your time that isn't going to constitute some kind of work?
All right, here's the thing though. These people are only able to say this in a society that functions. Okay. If everybody had their mindset, the the things that needed to move in society in order to keep everything running would cease because everybody would just fuck off and do whatever
Yeah,
they wanted, which means
if
society would collapse and
if
humans.
everyone wanted to go on vacation all at once, there would be no one to sustain the vacations because someone in order for you to go on vacation, you have to go to a hotel or a resort or whatever where there are people whose job it is to take care of you essentially and make sure that you're being waited upon well enough. Now,
Yeah,
granted, some of
and
this could be
hold on.
resolved with
The thing is, though,
automation, but good goddamn.
thing is, if that did happen and society did collapse because everybody was doing whatever they wanted and not what needed to be done in order to keep things afloat, then they would have to do real work, the work that people had to do hundreds of years ago, just in order to stay alive.
The stuff that is now essentially handled by machines and or corporations, like
Yes, exactly. And then,
manual textiling, digging and then getting water from a well, etc., etc.
yeah, and at that point, they wouldn't even have the time to complain.
I There's a part of me that wonders if these people might be happier in that circumstance. Because here's the thing, so much of these people's moral and political zeitgeist is based on the oppressor oppressed dichotomy. Is it possible that much like we've often noticed the fact that the reason why modern day activism is so bass backwards is because all of the all of the most obvious examples of systems that actually needed to be fought for have already been fought for, and the victories have already been done. For example, the reason why BLM is such a shit show is because the civil rights movement already happened, and there's nowhere meaningful else to go on that vector. I do wonder if these people would be happier in an oppressive system because that seems to be where their brain defaults to anyway. Like they came into life expecting, or they came out of college probably more aptly expecting a world full of oppression. And one of the reasons they're so dissatisfied is because the world we live in is not one of oppression, like in any meaningful sense, except for perhaps the men's rights thing, which is the only vector of activism that I think is legitimate now, and it's the only one they don't seem to care about because it's so counterintuitive to them. What do you
The
know?
way I see it is that a lot of people are lacking purpose nowadays, whereas in previous societies, survival in itself would be your purpose. Your purpose is to not die.
You you didn't have leisure to postulate anything further than that. Like it, if you went back to a medieval peasant and tried to explain half of this bullshit to them, they would be like, "Oi, that's nice and all. That's nice and all, mate, but I'm a bit busy wondering if the crops will come in because we just had a snowstorm and my family might starve to death this winter. Wouldn't you know?
Thing is, even during the Renaissance, when all these people and these great thinkers were coming about and these great artists and everything, people were still doing more work to survive than we are now.
Yep. And as much as I hate the concept of an aristocracy, for I am an American, and the natural fuck your aristocracy, throw tea in the harbor impulse is strong in me, but as much as I hate the old school aristocracy, and I'm glad we got rid of them, at least in America, the new school aristocracy is even worse because the old school aristocracy at least had the twin specters of noblesse oblige and the obligations of patronage to consider. Like there were codes of conduct you were supposed to aspire to as an aristocrat, and if you didn't, there were consequences for that. And you were supposed to be constructive in the sense of being a patron to the arts, being a patron to the sciences, being a patron to various other intellectual movements. And once again, because we've used up most of the creative juice that appears to be inherent to humanity, there are no great creative endeavors being done anymore. And so instead of funneling towards a next great work of art or the next great scientific breakthrough or the next great literary breakthrough, instead, they've chosen to patronize the concept of social justice, and the only kind of art they patronize anymore is the modern kind of art, i.e., the let's make anti-art to prove that art has no value and no meaning, and meaning is just something we assign to things. Streak of rationales. Oh boy.
But yeah, I think as more and more things become convenient, we are lowering our capacity as human beings. I mean, human beings did great feats of architecture with nothing more than charcoal and papyrus. And now if you don't have like a computer program to you know do the math and kind of bring your vision to life, you're not going to be able to build anything.
Yeah, not to be a dick as well, but before we could build buildings that still stand the test of time with a map system and a couple of ropes and what essentially amounted to a pulley. Now we can't replicate the Great Pyramids even with hydraulic presses and cranes and everything the fuck else. Like shit that we now have heavy machinery to do used to be done by hand. And the sad thing is, those buildings are still around. But if you've ever seen the History Channel show Life After People, you know most of what we call modern society would be the edifice of modern society would be gone in less than 200 years if there was no one around to maintain it. But the stoneworks of the Stonehenges and Great Pyramids and so on and so forth will still be here probably long enough to be recognized as artificial structures by the bonobos and chimps when they eventually evolve up and replace us. What do you know?
Well, that's the thing, though, because people used to know that quality is important and quality costs. But now people just say, "I need a building, do it quickly. I don't care how cheap it is. I just need one."
Well, here's the other thing, and this is my particular wheelhouse because I do call myself the authenticator for a reason here. We used to at least operate on the assumption that quality was a thing that existed, like out there in the world objectively, regardless of whether humans wanted it to exist or not. And now we've gone through the phase of quality is entirely subjective, and we've now landed in the phase of the discussion where we go, quality is actually a harmful illusion and is oppressive. We need to do everything we can to undermine it at every turn, to free ourselves from it. And that's why we have shows like Velda and comics like the New Warriors.
And you know, when you say that things have quality, you are saying that some things are inherently better than other things. The thing is, you could also apply that concept to people. But people who aren't as good as other people, they have their feelings getting hurt, and instead of actually doing in the work to change themselves and make themselves better people, which they have the capacity to do, they're just not willing to put in the effort to do so. You instead
Or at the very
try.
least, the best version of whatever they are to begin with. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like you could become better, but you're just choosing not to, which is which is what leads to basically the downfalls of civilization. Because if people don't strive to better themselves, then everything is just eventually going to crumble to the lowest common denominator.
And then the bygone days of terror where humans struggled for survival will return with a vengeance. And being as I am 5'4", crippled and gay and skinny, I really would prefer if that didn't happen. If that's all the same with everyone else, because um, I am I can survive pretty decently here in the ergonomically fine-tuned Western world. And as much as I love evolution, I don't want to be subject to that much of it at once. Because Lord knows I'm not going to be surviving. I mean, I flatter myself that I do have persuasion and manipulation talents to rival Randall Flagg, but persuasion and manipulation only gets you so far.
Well, the thing is, it's one thing to be, physically disabled, a condition beyond your control, but it's another thing to just be lazy and have no discernible skills of value. Like there are people,
To resent the idea that you should have to do anything.
now who are making lots of money with virtually no skill. Well, there are lots of people who do jobs that require a lot of skill, that requires years of training, and they don't get paid nearly as much. Like the values our society should have for labor are now like completely inverted.
Yeah, prior to Elon doing his Elon thing for Twitter, the day in the lifers were making more money than the engineers and programmers who made the site actually work, even though they did 24 like almost 22-hour coding binges.
It's like a lot of the thing is, you know, done by we the people too. Like all these people who are making money on like say like something like Twitch, like these like people may find it entertaining, but it contributes nothing to the value of society, and it truly doesn't help society function. Like if their entire body of work was stripped away today, society would still function, and with many of them, I'd argue, would probably function better.
Arguably better, yes. The irony of that. Eh, I
Meanwhile,
mean,
like the people whose job it is to like grow food or raise animals that we turn into food, like they are
we have
providing the
contempt for
necessary
them now.
things that people need to live, but they don't make nearly as much money as they should. Certainly not nearly as much as these people whose only marketable skill is playing a video game while looking slightly higher than mid.
And meanwhile, the abstract academics that we call our intellectual elite in this modern zeitgeist are penning all sorts of screeds about how those hardworking food producing motherfuckers, they're immoral and wrong, and they should stop doing what they're doing. And also, food comes from the store, bigot. Why do you care about the farm to table pipeline? I wish I was making a single word of this up, but as we all know, I am not. It is verifiable. You may Google it if you like.
You know, if the stores ever, did shut down and we were in like a real food crisis, like what happened with some communist countries, the reason why
Or
communism is
let's
terrible.
say we found ourselves in a version of Stephen King's The Stand all of a sudden.
I haven't read that book.
Dude, I was extra fortunate because my best friend of many years that I met in junior year of high school had been bitching at me to read it for years, and I finally during COVID took a chance to read it, and it's a story about the consequences of a supernaturally tinged, albeit pandemic, and man, did it like bearing in mind that he wrote this in the 70s and then revised it in the 90s. Dude was prescient as all fucking hell. It genuine it gen I do genuinely think that part of my reading experience was improved by reading it during COVID because it was one of those I can literally see what he's getting at here in the course of this in the course of the world in which I'm living. But needless to say, The Stand is probably Stephen King's best work. Period. It is also long. It is unusually like cartoonishly long, but it is also very worth it. And read the unabridged um read the unabridged edition, the extended edition that he released on I think it was the 10th anniversary. It adds more, but it's worth the added stuff only improves on the original because apparently that was the book he was originally wanting to publish, but his publisher was like, we couldn't possibly publish a book this long. Cut 100 pages out of it, or we will not take this. And so he did. And then, of course, when it became one of the best-selling books ever, um, the publisher came back and was like, "Hey, Steven, you know how you originally pitched this being like 300 pages longer? Um, you want to add it back in because everybody wants more of this, and we want to make money. So win-win. You get to publish the book you originally wanted. The audience gets a better book, and we get to reap all the money." Yeah,
Sounds
but
good.
long story short, The Stand is awesome and is just staggeringly prescient. And anyone who remembers COVID will probably probably start feeling sympathy pains for the characters in the book before too
You
long.
know, I was thinking about the intellectuals that you mentioned before. Like they have like they don't have standards when it comes to their ideas because whatever somebody tries to implement their far too idealistic ideals into the real world, it inevitably ends up screwing up and failing.
Crashing and
The thing
burn.
is, yeah, but they never actually take the time to evaluate whether or not their idea was actually capable of succeeding. They always just go, no, like it's not possible that my idea was wrong. It's that people didn't commit enough to it, or that we didn't have
Or,
enough
or,
funding,
or
or people
the
just didn't
world
commit
was
hard
simply wrong. The world should feel bad for not living up to my ideal rather than the other way around.
enough. And here's the thing, like it's because these people don't actually have to produce an actual thing. Like here's the thing, for like if you're trying to actually invent something or create something, like if it doesn't work, it just doesn't work, and then you have to go back to the drawing board and figure out a way to make it work. Like so many inventions that we have now, like they went through so many like prototypes and like process of elimination on designs and things to until they actually got a final working product, which is what we
How
have
many
now.
how
Whereas
many
these
different how
people,
many different iterations of the light bulb did Edison try before he landed on one that actually worked?
I think at least 100.
And then of course Tesla one shot made a better one because Tesla is awesome, and then Edison took the credit anyway. But that's neither here nor there. Sympathy for Nikola Tesla might have to be a entire episode of this show because if there is a man who got fucked harder by corporations and the world and society than Nikola Tesla, I'm having a hard time naming it.
Yeah. So it's like these people keep rehashing the same bad ideas over and over and over again, thinking that they're finally going to be,
Irrespective of whether they've been rebutted or not.
yeah, they think that they're going to be the one that can somehow get enough people to commit to it to get it to work. That's why communism still hasn't died.
Yeah, I was just about to say, real Marxism hasn't been tried. Oh,
And speaking
yeah.
of, professional useless people, like, like that's what Karl Marx was. Karl Marx was a professional useless person. Like he sponged off his friends, he sponged off his father, and I actually read a letter his father
Oh God, the letters.
wrote
Oh my
about how he
God.
was just,
The
yeah, he was just like wasting money. He threw away his fiance. He like dropped out of school. He's just like spending so much of their money more than other people spend in a whole year. It's just like you
in other
are
words,
a parasite.
all those rich college kids who adopt Marxism are cut right from its progenitor's cloth there because Karl Marx probably wasn't the first dilettante intellectual to be born from, wealthy college bullshit, but he certainly was patient zero for the modern version, if anything else.
Yeah, the man was a parasite.
It's funny, every negative stereotype you have about college age Marxists began and was typified in Karl Marx himself. It is literally an ideology born from champagne socialism. The impulse of, I feel guilty, so I'm going to use my wealth to advocate for those who are less fortunate than me in a way that those less fortunate than me do not want, will not benefit from, and do not sympathize with in the least. But that's just small print, nothing to see here.
Yeah, the thing is, all these all these people that they claim to be standing up for, like, really, what would benefit them more is just as if you made it easier for them to succeed, not by giving them things, but by getting like useless government restrictions out of their way so that they could continue to push
Innovate.
forward through their own hard work.
Also, it's funny to me how they how these people speak for the working class in the abstract, and yet every single motherfucking working class person will tell them in great and explicit detail why that is full of shit. And rather than reevaluate their ideology, they simply look at that and go, "You've internalized the ethic of the upper classes. You're working classing wrong." It's
Meanwhile, these people have
it's
never worked until the class
internalized
of their own in their
capitalism or
lives.
some shit, which is the same maneuver that every other vector of social justice pulls with regards to any other ideological hive mind they've declared exists, even though it doesn't.
Yeah, one of my favorite posts on Twitter of all time is someone asks, "What would you do if you actually achieved the communist revolution?" One woman said that, "Oh, I'd probably paint and grow things on my farm," and then somebody replied under that, "Our farm."
Yeah, yeah. The what's the plan after the revolution thing is is very surreal. It never even seems to occur to them that they might not ever get there, simply not because of any external woo woo, but because their ideas simply do not follow from one another. Period. Like, never mind the empirical failings. There are logical failings inherent to the blueprint that that necessitate the failure. No matter what variables you plug into this system, it will fail because it is logically incoherent to begin with. But never
Also,
mind.
it goes against the very nature of humanity.
Well, the nature of
But
humanity, the nature of logic, the
all right, we can
nature of.
go.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, you were saying. Go ahead.
No, you go. I was rambling a little bit too much.
No. Well, I was just gonna say, it's about time to wrap up. I was gonna ask if you have any final thoughts on standards for relationship for yourself, for society.
Standards are good and rational and reasonable, and more to the point, so is causality and transaction. In fact, causality and transaction probably should be the basis of most standards in a sane world. And abstraction is not morally superior, it's not intellectually superior, and it's not a um higher order to appeal to. Things that make sense should make sense on as many levels as you can manage, and especially in the straightforward sense. If whatever ideal you're appealing to is not logically straightforward, or deliberately spites or flies in the face of things that are logically straightforward, something has gone wrong and you should reevaluate. This has been my advice for the day. I apologize for how off I've been this live stream, guys. Long story short, I attempted to go to bed early last night so that I would be rested for this show. And all that accomplished was it made me stay up in bed, lying awake for 3 or 4 hours until 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock this morning. At which point I eventually just said, fuck it, I will sleep extra next night. And so I haven't slept at all today. So that's why I'm off and babbling even more than usual. If that was at all a concern on you guys' mind, I'm fine. It's just I tried to go to bed earlier than I normally do. I shouldn't have. It fucked up my sleep schedule, and now here we are. I try to get ahead, and I end up just getting more behind. That ain't the story of my fucking life. I don't know what is.
My final thoughts are: your standards should be consistent across the board, in all aspects of your life, dating, your own behavior, how you treat other people, and in regards to dating specifically, if the person you're interested in doesn't have standards that they apply evenly, they're probably not going to be a very good partner.
Yeah, also, I will also add your standards should start with you and only apply to other people the moment you can perfect your standards for yourself. And if you find yourself incapable of living up to your standards, then you need to reevaluate your standards, and you sure as shit don't get to universalize them to other people. Your standards should be exothermic, meaning they start inward and move out rather than the other way around. And if you meet anyone who tries to apply standards to the world that they do not apply to themselves, run the other way, except for the possibility of rebutting them, because that is all they're good for.
Everybody, I've been Mystery.
I have been a very tired Dalton Mortimer, the Authenticator, and we have been the Duality of Man. Cheers, guys. I'm going to bed.
Bye, everybody.